Welcome to the AI, the Future of Us, a podcast style video series that explores the ways AI is shaping our future and how we can prepare for the changes that lie ahead. I'm your host, Firat Tekiner, and today we are joined by Sam McVeety, who is the area tech lead for data analytics here in Google Cloud. Thank you for being here today, Sam.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Let's start with some background. And I know that you have done a lot of things in Google and data analytics and AI space. And could you please tell us a bit about your background and expertise in the field of data and analytics and AI?
Yeah, definitely. So I sort of grew up doing streaming analytics. That is the first team that I joined. And since then, have really expanded my horizons to work on a bunch of different projects throughout data analytics. And then as AI has become increasingly important, both deepened my own understanding. It's fun to read a lot of papers as well as work with colleagues who are, have been doing that for years and years. So it's a really exciting time to be part of the sort of convergence of these two areas and really looking to see what we can do.
Yes, it's interesting, right? And we are seeing the two very distinct areas are really coming together as well these days, and I totally agree with you. Could you share some of the key AI developments that you have witnessed during your, career as well, please?
Sure. So, I think the one that we're all very familiar with is self-driving cars. And I think that one is really interesting because it's sort of, full self-driving cars are always 5 years away. And you ask in 5 years and they're 5 years away. And I think that's really instructive because I think one of the really interesting and terrifying things about AI is we don't know where the asymptotes are. Like, are we hitting diminishing returns now or not? And you sort of find that out with each new application. So there's that one. I mean, as somebody who played a bunch of StarCraft as a kid, I was very excited to see the Alpha Star stuff that DeepMind did. That was pretty impressive. So those are maybe the two that I would highlight.
Yes, and I think we all played Warcraft, and it's interesting where things are leading to, right? From the times that we dealt with all of that as well. So, and let's look at a little bit of the impact of AI on data analytics ecosystem. And I know that you are really passionate about this, and you have been really, one of the leading folks here as well. So, with the use of the Gen AI applications such as Bard, now AI is top of mind for everyone. And I don't spend a day actually these days that goes by without talking to a customer around Gen AI as well. And in your opinion, what are the most significant ways that AI is currently impacting the society as well?
Yeah, such a big question. I think it's really shining a light on what does knowledge actually mean and what does understanding mean and sort of where is there a difference between those. And so I think you see sort of those lines blur, but you see things that large language models are really good at as far as summarization, translation, things like that. But then sort of deductive reasoning is still more of an open problem. And so I think that often we sort of put those all in the same bucket, but this is really teaching us how they're different and they're different problems. And so that's been really interesting. And I think we'll see as new models emerge what capabilities they have, but it's sort of trying to walk that line of there are some things that they're really good at and how to explore those capabilities while also being aware that there's some things that maybe they a little overconfident about and how do you manage that?
It's interesting, right, that despite all the knowledge and expertise, we are still learning, which is the great thing about this, how these are interacting with all the new use cases that are coming through as well. And technology ecosystem is expanding pretty rapidly because of that. And generative AI is acting as a catalyst, and everyone is interested in this. How do you see AI evolving in the data analytics ecosystem in the next few years? And what impact do you think that it will have on number of industries out there as well?
So my hope is that it really becomes a tool for sort of democratization and accessibility. I think that as someone who has spent a fair amount of time learning different programming languages and things like that, I recognize that those can be a huge barrier for folks. And so I think that there's a really exciting trend of actually treating natural language like an interface to a bunch of different surfaces that you couldn't before. And so I think that I hope has the potential to really change who gets to do data analytics and how much time they have to put in to be able to be at that table. So I think that part is really exciting for me. I think the sort of flip side of that is that for folks that have worked in data, they know that you can tell misleading stories with data as well. And so I do worry a bit that it's going to make it easier to sort of spin misleading things with data tools. And so I think we have to figure out how to really like build guardrails around that where we can.
And I think you're absolutely right. That, I write C code still better than writing SQL code, and I'm looking forward to using these tools, and they have been helping me from the SQL side. But I also agree that you know data is effectively what you make out of it, right? And how much that you use for depending on the problem that you are as well. And I think you are spot on that we need to make sure the railguards are around that. And what are the examples of how GenAI is currently being effectively used in the data analytics and business intelligence ecosystem as well, from your point of view?
So right now, I think where we're seeing people do some very successful experiments around sort of basic natural language to SQL and other languages. I think one of the really nice sort of things that it's proven to be good at is also translating to different charting libraries. And so you can say like, make me a graph, and the current models are pretty good at that. And I think that's one of these examples of hopefully that actually allows people to convey information better and makes it more accessible than it was before. Instead of, step one, like find a charting library you like, step two, learn how it works, step three, debug, and like step four, show the graph. Like that, hopefully that all just gets tighter and more accessible.
It is definitely going to make us a lot more productive, right? Because particularly folks who are, capable and understanding and have the foundations of doing this, rather than you going and shopping around and looking for different things how they work, it will accelerate and act as a catalyst for the professionals as well, I think. Uh, and with that, what value does Gen AI bring to organizations?
So I hope that it brings sort of a lot more optionality and flexibility in terms of what technologies that organizations can adapt and how they can change their plans. Where I I sort of informally like to refer to generative AI as super glue in a lot of cases, because I think a lot of the things that hold organizations back from adopting a new technology is that you've got, 10 years of accumulated glue code that works with the old technology and nobody knows how it works and nobody wants to rewrite it. And I think that, with the translation capabilities of generative AI, you really are able to say like, no, let's use this new library and like let's, we have an AI to do some of that translation that is just otherwise just intractably large. And so I hope that it allows sort of new technologies to emerge and be adopted in a way that was just harder before because that barrier to entry was so high.
Yes, and coming from the data analytics background, I can relate to that, right? Because one of the challenges that I always faced, you always find a mainframe somewhere that there's the COBOL that you really need to look into. It is a and I never understood how it works actually, despite it is the way that it is very C-like as well at some point. So, but and there are also challenges, right? And and applying and using generative AI as well? And what are the main overlaps that you see? Because we treated business intelligence, data analytics, and machine learning as separate entities in many organizations. This is what we see from most of our customers as well at the moment, right? And how do you think that this will play out?
So I think there's sort of a really exciting like closing the loop aspect to what's happening right now, because I think that it was sort of an open secret that maybe 80% of doing ML before is actually like gathering data and cleaning the data and understanding your data. And then 20% is doing the actual model mechanics and training and things like that. And so I think it's been the case that sort of data has always fed machine learning. And now we're in this really exciting place where like machine learning can potentially augment how you are interacting with data. So it can help you do data cleaning. It can help with all these analytics and charting tasks that we talked about before. So I think like it's really exciting that becomes sort of a two-way street and that there's sort of a lot more collaboration opportunities opened up by it.
Yes, and I totally agree, and I can relate to that, right? And my background is ML, and but no one wants to pay my skills at 20 years ago when I was doing this, and I spent most of my time in data. I became so good at it, so I moved disciplines as a result of it as well, right? So, and it is you are absolutely right. It is still the case that the data preparation is core, and then bigger part of the ML as well. But with that, the next thing that comes to my mind is, what are the most pressing ethical considerations surrounding AI development and use with the data analytics in mind for you?
Yeah, that's another big question. I mean, I think that I would make sure that folks are referring to the scholarship of folks like Sophia Noble and Virginia Eubanks and all the folks that have looked at sort of what does it mean to ethically use algorithms or decide that ethically you shouldn't use a given algorithm. And so I think that sort of trend certainly emerges here is where we look at AI and we say, rather than assume that it is perfectible, to really look critically at use cases and say, is this purpose fit for this? Do the benefits outweigh the harms? And maybe yes, maybe no, but to really leave that question open because I think that as a society we really like to sort of break problems down into like how can we fix this with technology, and sometimes technology is great, and other times it really like requires nuance and subtlety that is just really hard to reach with the given technology, and you can perpetuate a lot of harms if you sort of ignore those nuances. So I think they're very concretely in a lot of the models today, like we recognize that there's bias training data that's going into them, and I think the sort of state of the art is to basically teach models to sort of self-censor at the last mile and say like, oh, don't say that thing, that's the bad thing. But in the data ecosystem, what really concerns me is that if those biases are still retained in the model and we're asking people to do sort of complex analyses and look at correlations and different things, I think there are ways that sort of really sort of negative, harmful correlations could appear in analytics in a way that is not obvious to those sort of low pass filters that say like, are you saying something blatantly offensive? And so I think especially when we're looking at things like demographic data, we need to be really careful about understanding what correlations might be hidden in the data that correspond to biases in the training set. So that's that's what keeps me up at night.
Yes, and the key is, I think, that you to have the human-centric approach at the end of the day, and sort it as much as we can with the data, because the ML algorithms are biased with the data that we are feeding to it effectively, and then that bias is propagated through the algorithms as well at the end of the day. And I think you are absolutely right. That is the one of the key things as well. But I would like to look ahead a little bit, and let's look into how the AI and business intelligence comes across as well. What do you believe the most exciting potential, because it is giving a lot of opportunities to us, or AI that we have yet to see with the data analytics tools?
Yeah, so maybe a couple of things. I think one is just the idea that we could use natural language as an interface to all these things that we couldn't before. I think that just is like fundamentally such an empowering idea. If we can do that thoughtfully, that's just really exciting. And then I think along those same lines, I sort of think about like what are all the expensive things that we're used to doing that all of a sudden get much easier? And then how does that mean that we could actually rethink these workflows in a fundamentally new way? So, usually we have this assumption that like it takes a lot of time to write SQL because I have to think about the question I want to ask, I have to translate it to SQL and debug. And if that sort of distance or that time investment becomes very small, like what does that mean about my ability to iterate on different questions or to spend that time elsewhere on different pieces of the system? So I think we have sort of all these built-in assumptions to how we've built things over time. And this gives us a chance to revisit those and maybe build fundamentally new experiences.
And I agree with you. And it is an opportunity cost, right? Because if we spend time on the things that we can improve and save time on, we can focus on the things that will add more value to the things that we are working on as well. And with that, what advice would you give to individuals working in data analytics, looking to explore the future that AI is clearly going to play a lot more significant role?
Yeah, I think broadly it's sort of prepare for the unexpected. But I think there's ways to sort of thoughtfully do that. Is that you can sort of look at like different branches the future might take. And so, one of them is we've sort of seen a big burst of generative AI accomplishments, and the sort of pieces are on the table, and we're going to spend the next 6-12 months figuring out how to assemble those. Another possible future is we continue to sort of see accelerating advancements, and a bunch of the things that we thought were true are no longer true in 3 months. And so you just sort of weighing those and acting accordingly. So one concrete thing that I think is important is just sort of to potentially not over-index on any single approach, because it might actually turn out to be obsolete in 3 months. And so the one that I'm most favorite of talking about is when folks do prompt engineering. It's really easy to sort of get carried away there and sort of spend hours and hours crafting the perfect prompt, and then the new model comes out and your prompt no longer works. And so I think just figuring out how to sort of apply each approach in moderation and apply a variety of approaches, so you can sort of hedge and say, where might this be hitting diminishing returns? Where should I try a different strategy? And so as a data person, I think like figuring out those different strategies and just also building a good mental model for what models can and can't do. I think there are sort of hats that they're really good at, of like the translator, the summarizer. And so if you think about those, you can start to intuit different system diagrams that puts those in those different roles and takes advantage of their capabilities. And I think that's a lot more helpful than just sort of treating it as like this generic magic box that does, you know, some things, but other things not well. And so I think trying to sort of systematize it and taxonomize what this might be for different data workflows is a couple things that I would suggest.
And I agree. And I recently read up, it was in Harvard Business Review around the future engineering. Actually, this is one of the things that they discuss in detail there. That you are spending lots of time on tuning your prompts, but as you say, the model is changing, and the models will get better and better to accommodate more generic and more the spoken language, as well as you say with the natural language. So it is important to understand the fundamentals of how all of this works as well. And as the English, old English saying goes, horses for courses, where you should be using the right tools as well, in a sense, I think would be the key. And as we look ahead to the future of AI, and this is my last question, what do you believe are the most critical areas of research and development that need to be addressed to make it more effective?
So, I mean, I think that I sort of gravitate immediately toward the guardrails, because I think sort of naturally people are going to want to build more and more powerful models. And like that part is going to take care of itself for better or for worse. But I think that in terms of, teaching models humility is one thing that I would love to see sort of that formalized more, where we sort of have these rough ideas of confidence scores. But I think especially with some of the early chat models, just saw like this sort of unearned confidence of, I'm going to tell you this thing that is flagrantly not true, but I'm going to say it in a very convincing, confident way. I think it could be really powerful if we actually sort of were able to incorporate human notions of humility and that sort of idea of, I might not have all the answers here. Here's my best guess, and presenting that in a more nuanced, sort of qualified way. And then, certainly responsible AI. I think that some of the ideas in synthetic data generation and how you could potentially reweight a training set to say, this has these biases. Let's fix those in the training set before we train the model. I think there's some really exciting, important areas. And then looking at the sort of societal implications, I think the work that's happening in watermarking AI generated content is incredibly important. I think that there's sort of going to be this explosion of content, and figuring out how to make sure that is labeled appropriately and understood appropriately is really important for how our society sort of consumes and interacts with information and interacts with each other.
And I think that point that you made there is really important, right? Because the danger is that we might end up with all the content generated by machines at the end of the day, which is the big danger here. And also, it is, it comes back into the having this human-centric approach at the end of the day, right? So, what is right for doing it? What would be the right thing that for the society? I think is the key. And thanks, Sam. I really appreciate that you joining us today. It has been incredible, insightful, to hear your thoughts on the impact and effective use of AI. We look forward to seeing how AI will continue to shape the world around us, and hope everyone has been inspired with embrace with the potential opportunities. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much. My pleasure.